Hello, hello. We'll just wait a minute or two and let people come in. As they're arriving, you just take a breath, put your feet on the floor, get ready, get centered, get grounded. For about an hour and a half, we're going to go through a few things. I never know quite what I'm going to do in these sessions because they're slightly guided by what happens here. So we'll find out together. Hello. Easy. How you doing? Familiar faces, but also welcome to those that I've not seen before or we'll start in a second. Hello. Hi, Daniel. Thanks for those comments today. Appreciate it. Hello, Vanessa. Welcome. Okay. Yes, it is okay to start with this session and not caught up in the replay, because a lot of how this works, that I can say this before people arrive, it'll be on the recording as well, which is a lot of how this works is that you essentially bring who you are right now in this moment with all your thoughts, feelings, actions, reactions, responses, karma, contracts, agreements, beliefs, connections to family, heritage, unusual circumstances, events, your whole collection of your experience. And then something happens here between us as a group energy, but also some of the thoughts and ideas that stimulate different ways of thinking, different new ways of thinking, which then interacts, if you're open to it and you give permission for your own self, not to me, that you can have that kind of creativity or fluidity. So there's a phrase, wherever you go, there you are. So the presenting things that we bring are the current body, mind shape that we're bringing into this experience. And that's what's great about, I think, what's happening with personal development and change is it's becoming more holographic and more systemic. It's probably the best way to put it. And I'll go into, actually, you don't need to understand any of this. The goal here is to come and enjoy, experience, and find out for yourself in your own experience what happens and whether you like it or you don't like it, whether you get something or this is not for you. So that is the kind of framing. We'll just let a couple more people arrive and then I'll start. Okay, so I know quite a few faces here, but also welcome to those who I don't know yet. And so this is the second session, welcome everyone, of these 3 free sessions on love and money. And my name is Anand Rao. I have been doing this kind of personal development, spiritual development for about 25 years or so. My background is in theoretical physics, did a physics degree, then joined the oil industry, decided on day one, that's not what I wanted to do with my life. But the first 8 years of my career took me to Aberdeen, Copenhagen, Jakarta. And so I stayed with the oil company because it allowed me to put myself into different contexts, different situations, different environments, and be influenced and changed by that. And what I'm hoping for these kinds of sessions, these sessions, is that it's more of an experience than content knowledge. So we'll be doing kind of processes, practices, and the more you kind of engage and play, essentially, I think the more you'll get out of it and the more fun you'll have. Yeah. Okay. So I think we've got a quorum. So put in the chat where you're coming from. Just name and, well, your name's already there. So just where in the world you are, just out of interest, so you can see. We have some Europeans. I wanted to know that because maybe we do these in our earlier, but then our friend from New Zealand doesn't want to get up an hour earlier. So at San Diego, New Jersey, Croatia, Portsmouth in the UK, yay. I'm in Buckinghamshire, by the way, in the UK. Idaho, Scotland, Cyprus, Portugal, Kentucky, welcome, welcome, welcome. Nevada. Okay, Fairfield, USA. Excellent. All right, so let's just do a first basic clearing. So if you put your feet on the floor and close your eyes for a second and just attend to your body sensations. Notice your breath going in and out. And arriving here. Often we can leave bits of ourselves somewhere else, which is really just our attention is somewhere else. And so calling back your attention to this moment can allow us to feel more whole and complete and have more of our resources available to make the changes we want to make, and just to experience life more fully. And imagine in front of you, about 6 to 8 feet, is a rose. You can make it any color you like. And then imagine there's a cord going from that rose all the way down to the ground and into the earth. And give yourself permission to let go of anything you don't need in this moment. Going out to that rose in front of you and draining into the ground. And then imagine a rose 6 to 8 feet behind you. And then let anything you're ready to let go of move out of your energy field, especially other people's energies. And I'll explain that in a minute. But right now, you don't need to know what that is. Just, you cannot be wrong about your subjective experience. So whatever you're experiencing is what you're experiencing. Let that go into the ground. And then imagine a rose 6 to 8 feet to your left. And imagine anything that you're ready to let go of in that direction that goes most easily to release, let go. And some of you might feel the relief of that. We're moving our attention in ways that we don't normally move it. And so we find out what happens when we move our attention outside of the habitual way we keep it close to us for most of the time for most of us. And imagine a rose off to the right, about 6 to 8 feet. As you get the hang of it, because the brain learns from patterns, letting go of anything you don't need from your entire body, mind, energy system, floating off to the right, and going down that cord and down into the ground. And then let that rose go. And imagine a rose 6 to 8 feet above your head. It's the practice of moving your attention in ways you don't normally move it. And then let go from your body, mind, energy system, any thoughts, feelings, reactions, programming, conditioning, anything that's not yours, to that rose 6 to 8 feet above your head, and then let that go. And then imagine a rose 6 to 8 feet below you. Gently pulling and releasing anything that you can allow to drop, release. Notice your physiology. Notice if there's that kind of relief breath that happens when our body lets go. And then feel your feet on the floor. Feel the ground supporting you. Perfectly balanced in terms of forces. Forces up equal the forces down. Last time I checked, no one, when I was walking down the street, was flying off into the air or getting sucked into the ground. They were perfectly supported in balance by the earth. And then notice through closing our eyes, moving our attention in deliberate ways, what that's done to your body, mind, energy, physiology, and your state. What we're learning in this program, and all the work that I like to teach people, is that there are things you can do to influence your experience of existence without having to get into a fight about it. Just whatever is ready to happen right now is enough. And that tends to build quite rapidly over time when we stop bullying ourselves into change. Okay. And when you're ready, just very gently open your eyes. Come on back. Wiggle your fingers and toes. The yawn and the stretch if you want to. And then just notice your state change. Right. So very simple visualization. When we close our eyes, we get these bursts of alpha waves. So we know how some of this works. We get the parasympathetic relaxation response. And we can kind of use all of this kind of information and knowledge to harness our ability to be more elegant about change and growth and development and evolution. All right. So put in the chat what state, how you're feeling right now. Super relaxed. Deeply centered. Expansive, lovely. Relaxed, peaceful, clear. Settled. Good. Calm, calm, calm. Positive and anticipatory. Giving me tricky words to say. All right. Okay. So the way this, how many of you have actually seen the replay, the first one, session one? So not everyone. All right. So that's okay because of what I said at the beginning, which is that you can pick this up and then you can pick that up, and they are elements and pieces of the foundations of being able to create love and money in your life. So I'll just go through briefly what the logic of this kind of way of this approach is, which is that most people want love and money, right? They want love, money, and health is usually the third one. And then contribution and service and all these kinds of things kind of come in, right? Because when you have what you need, and literally what you need, not what you want, then you tend to be okay to serve others and do good in the world. So I train with, I've got a co-trainer, Annie Lala. I'll put it, actually, can one of the people who know put her website in the chat? And she's a love and relationship coach. And we were talking and kind of realized that, well, in the big three, love, money, and health, right? Health is more like a way of being, but love and money are like a, well, they're nouns, right? They're abstract nouns, but you can't get a pound of love. Actually, you used to be able to get money, right? So that was possible. But think about this. Think about chunking up from kind of more concrete or solid words to abundance and connection, right? And someone mentioned expansive, right? We're kind of going, and I'm going to go through stage development a little bit, building on last time, is that we kind of go, when we're growing up, we go through a concrete tier, like the world is solid, right, and tangible. Then we enter the world of ideas, right? And if we keep going in our spiritual development, we go into what formlessness or emptiness, right? This kind of infinite realm of beingness where we're just happy to be alive and experiencing stuff, to be honest, right? Now, that from there, because it's almost beyond time and space, right? So then we don't have these physical limitations. We feel more spacious, more expansive, more fluid. And very rapidly, if you go from love and money to abundance and connection to resonance and flow as a way of being in life, right? We tend to create the love and money that we want. And what you find is any areas where somebody isn't doing that, right? If you're not getting the thing that you want, how many people feel a stuckness or a block or a resistance or a, right? And what's amazing about our body, mind, energy systems is it shows up physiologically, right? It's a direct information kind of return to us. And if we train our nervous systems to be able to detect it, then we can return to flow, return to ease, and we don't actually have to go through long narratives in order to get these things to resolve. So the classic kind of coaching and therapy was, how do I get a cognitive narrative that makes sense in order to exit this tangle or this knot or this resistance I've got into, right? But what we're going to do today, and what's kind of foundational in the work I like to do, is that we can go directly at it, right, through the language of our physiology and our body energy systems. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. So who here has come here with an intention, something that you want to have happen? Anybody? Hopefully, right? So, all right. So just briefly put in the chat what that is. Like if you, in the next hour and 10 minutes, you got that shift. So a better relationship with money. Okay. That you would know that something's going on here, because you would know. See, here's the thing. If you write something in the chat, I already know that a part of your mind must have represented it, right? Everybody knows that, right? Because otherwise, how would you know to want something if you didn't already know how you think you would feel if you got it? Does that make sense? All right. So better relationship with money. Anybody else? Fear of a lack of money, right? Notice the physiological responses. Attracting my beloved, absolutely. Okay. I want to know that I don't have to work hard to earn a lot of money. Yes. 100 times my level of deservedness sense for an abundant life. Fantastic. I want to say something about that. Here's what happens, right? People put conditions on getting abundance or any of these things, right? So the claim there is, and I know Dr. Z, if I feel I deserve it, then I can have what I want and I can have an abundant life. But actually, they're two separate things, right? So you can have an abundant life, right? And you might not feel you deserve it, might not last very long, right? But actually, what if you felt that deservedness, regardless of what you have in absolute terms? But I guess you'd call that an abundant life, right? So we're moving from the physical to the subtle, which is a theme for today. Okay, greater clarity regarding action for purpose and romantic partner. Feel more freedom. Release my whole to be in flow and resonance. Okay, better relationship with money and easier connection to people. More magnetism to my future clients. Excellent, we can do that. Okay, anyone else? Going once, going twice. Allowing wealth in my partner to manifest by graduating my abundance mindsets. Great. All right. So I approach things a little bit differently than going directly at these things, right? So what happened in session one is that I talked about the foundational elements of stage development, right? So I'm going to just go over one right now, which is the Reichian rights, right? The organismic rights. So they are the right to exist, the right to need and want, the right to assert yourself in the world, to assert, the right to individuate, right, which is the right to consequences. So that imagine somebody like an overprotective parent who takes away all the consequences from a child. They never learn, right? They never separate out and individuate properly. And then the right to love and be loved. And I'm going to go over these in a minute. Now, the point is this: if someone wants to put themselves in the world, right? Now they want to assert themselves in the world. They want to stand and say, this is me, this is who I am, right? If they brought back from that, if they don't feel like they have a right to exist, right, at some level, that's going to get in the way, Right? It's going to be a major problem. So no amount of asserting actually works. And if you do a little bit of work on the right to exist, a whole bunch of other things can ripple through and work. Equally, the next one, the right to need and want. So many people have programming conditioning that says you can't have what you want, or you shouldn't have what you want, these kinds of things. There's a phrase in the north of England, which is something like they tell children, it's a horrible thing to say, but they say wanting doesn't get, or something like that. So basically you're kind of saying it's not okay to want things, right? How many people have that kind of, if I want things, then I'm selfish, or I'm judgment, selfish, greedy, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now, you can tackle these things at the level of mind and the level of beliefs, right? But today we're going to tackle them at the level of physiology and the foundational elements of what's called safety strategies in the body, right? So how many people have heard the thing that people don't change if they don't feel safe? Like basically what trumps pretty much everything else is if you don't feel safe to make a change, then that change just doesn't happen. It's like a part of our system intuitively wants to keep us coherent at all times, and it will do that at the cost of not being able to get what we want in the world. Right, so all making sense? Before we dive into some exercises, because I want this to be really kind of experiential and you to get real shifts. And we're also going to use some processes which are emotional regulation tools and techniques that actually, many of them come from trauma resolution, right? But they're not just useful for that. They are ways of resetting our nervous system in this moment. So as we think about the thing we want, and then how many people are getting like you get a body response, right? When you think about the thing that you want, or not having the thing that you're looking for, there's a physiological component of how you experience that, right? This is what we're going to work on directly today. Okay, so let's see if the tech works. Okay, so Stephen Kessler built on the work of John Purakis and others, and early bioenergetics actually came from Reich, which basically said that when we're as an animal, like on a fundamental physiological basis, right, we have these systems. Let me just show you, you probably know this already because it's popular. I just want to, we have an amygdala response, which is a response to threat, some form of threat, which is to either run away, to fight, to get aggressive, to kind of freeze and not move. And then there's actually two more, which is to completely shut down, or to fawn, to give in to other people's needs and wants, right? These are kind of fairly kind of direct reptilian, kind of more immediate responses that don't really respond to us just trying to think differently, right? For anyone who's tried to think differently and it hasn't worked, that's probably why, right? So back to this. Okay, so I want you to tune in when you think about the desire for that outcome that you just wrote down, right? And then what comes up that gets in the way. And some of them are more direct. So it's like, there was one here, to stop worrying, to release my hold. And there was one about having fear or concern, fear of lack of money, right? So I want you to think about what your response is. Put that aside for a second and think about what your response is. So Stephen Kessler developed this work. Give credit where credit's due. 5 Personality Patterns is an excellent book, worth reading, right? And he said that when people get stressed, they have a primary strategy for dealing with it until they repattern that, which is safety, groundedness, connectedness, belonging, wholeness, all these things. So think about when you get very early stages of kind of feeling threatened, is your immediate response to want to leave the situation, either physically leave or some people dissociate. They kind of leave their body. They just kind of they zone out. Right, so that's one type of response. Right, notice if that feels familiar, or whether no, I don't know what you're talking about. That doesn't make any sense. Right. Another response for safety is to try and cling to somebody else. So this is also going into fundamentals of, if you want a good relationship, and even attracting a good partner, attracting a partner, or even when you're in relationship, improving that, right? These are kind of primary responses that if you handle them, all of a sudden your relationship starts to improve, right? All of them, not just your primary one or your intimate one, or many if you're into that. So the next response that people can have if they get frightened or nervous is to try and find someone to cling to or grab hold of, right? This is also called grounding through others as well. So you feel safe and stable when you're with somebody, but when you're by yourself, you can't really do it. Years ago, I learned to skydive, right? And I was totally fine jumping out of a plane as long as I had an instructor holding on to me. The minute he would let go, I would black out, right? And so of course he had to come back and like pull the cord. So I got to do it again, right? And I never got the hang of it. This is 20 years ago now. And so I did 29 jumps, and I could only ever do it while I was connected to somebody. And the minute somebody else was gone, this merging pattern kicked in of, actually I left my body, right? So no one there, out, and I left and I blacked out, right? Which makes sense if you're falling through the air at 180 miles an hour. Probably not a good idea to do, actually, and now thinking about it. All right, so the next pattern some people do is to become incredibly stubborn, and they're like, I'm not moving, right? And we all got a bit of this kind of 2-year-old, 3-year-old temper tantrum, stubborn, plant your feet in the ground, I'm not going to move. Now, what happens if you're trying to get your outcomes or your goals, and a young part of you is doing this strategy? And it's not even a young part. It's because if you think about this, these kind of neural programs are kind of running, and when they're triggered, they override our, neocortex and our thinking brain, right? So think about if that seems familiar to you. The next one is the aggressive pattern. When people get scared, they can attack. Years ago, I worked for an oil company. I had a very gruff Scottish CEO, and he would come and bark at me. He would go, "What are you doing, Nan? Why are we doing? What are they doing? What's happening?" Right, and because someone's acting in a way he didn't understand. And one day he came over, and I remember this piece of information, which is that if someone has the aggressive pattern and you leave your body, they get frightened and they get even more aggressive, right? And if you can stay really centered and grounded with somebody who's aggressive but not violent, they will calm down. If they're just freaking out because they're scared, right, then you can stay present. And what I saw with this guy, George, is that I stayed absolutely present, and I said, I'm not sure, George, but we'll figure it out. There's a few things, come over here. And he was on the other side of the screen, and I said, just come over here and I'll show you a couple of things. But I literally saw the steam coming out of his ears and his kinds of energy settling down as he kind of thought, oh, someone here is grounded, right? And so he started to get calm. And the other is rigid. Some people, they will try and hide by pretending they don't exist. They'll kind of not move a lot and get less animated in their bodies. All right. So the antidote to these, which we'll come to, but we're not quite going to do it like this. The way Stephen Kessler does it is practice. Practice getting your core stable, your ground, the edge of your aura or your edge of your space, and then fill your space with your own energy, and then really know what's you and not you. And I'll come to that in terms of energies. We might do a bit more of the subtle energetic stuff today. All right. So who here, by listening to that, could identify their primary and secondary pattern? Yeah, does it sound familiar? Yes. Anyone who couldn't? No. Okay. All right. Now, if you couldn't, that's okay, because what we're going to do almost doesn't need conscious, fully conscious recognition. Now, that's a leap of faith. I won't ask you to have a leap of faith forever, but just long enough to do the exercise to see if anything happens. How about that? Does that work? Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So I'm going to show you a pose that comes from, looks like this. and it comes from a woman called Tapas Fleming, and she developed it. It's called the TAT pose, the Tapas acupressure technique. So here's what we're doing with this work, right? The way I like to think of this is that most people, when they find these techniques, they apply them to the problems they have, right? But the problem is that if you've got something else generating those problems are endless, right? And you can get, you know, if that system's still running where you want to leave the situation or merge with somebody or hunker down, and it'll just keep generating endless problems for you in your life. And they're all just examples. And if you're lucky, you'll resolve one of those and then it backwards resolves the issue that you had, but not necessarily, right? So in a way, what we're doing is rather than go, okay, let's look at the problem you have and how do you fix it? It's almost like saying, you're going to go and do some sports. Let's work on general fitness to begin with. So I said this in the first session. You can think of physical fitness as how quickly does your heart come back to resting heart rate. You can think of emotional fitness as when you're freaking out, how quickly do you come back to centered and balanced and grounded? You can think of energetic fitness as if you feel knocked off or like out of sorts or those kinds of things, how quickly do you return to feeling comfortable and balanced in your own energy? And if you want to go further, you can think of spiritual fitness as remembering your I am, which is that your whole life you've been you. No one can ever take that away from you. You know, your thoughts have changed, your feelings changed, your ideas have changed, your state has changed, your emotions have changed. But even your body, even your height and everything else has changed. Your relationships changed, environments changed. But you've always been you, your entire life, right? And when that clicks in, that recognition that not the idea of you, but that you are you, then something changes quite profoundly. Because now you are not your relationships, you can have your relationships. You're not your identity, you can evolve your identity, your personality. So much more becomes kind of loosened up and free. And I'll tell you a story about a client I had a little bit later. All right, so let's do this practice, see what happens. Oh, before we start, just rate from 0 to 10 how much right now it feels like you can get that outcome that you want. Right? And you can do it one of two ways, either how much you can get that outcome you want. So 10 being, yes, of course I can, very easy. 0 is no way, it's not possible for me, I don't know how, all of these kinds of things. I'll tell you what, let's do it like this. I want you to measure, let's do it like this. Let's measure the resistance that's in the way of getting to be able to fully embody the state of that outcome. So 7, 8, 8, 3. Yeah, so measuring the resistance, 7, 6, 2, 5, 4, 5. Excellent, 2. Okay, right. So just one more person coming in. Okay, so put one hand on the back of your head like this, the occipital lobe. Put your thumb and ring finger on either side of the nose. And then the middle finger goes in the center of the forehead. So hand on the back of the head, thumb and ring finger on the bridge of the nose, and the middle finger in the center of the forehead. And then take a breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. And just listen to these statements. And intend that some part of you knows how to do this. All of the origins of feeling fearful or scared that persuade you to attempt to leave, avoid, distract, can heal, release, and resolve now. Take a breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. All of the reasons, the conditioning, the programming that persuaded you that the only solution was to leave a situation or not address it, can heal, release, and resolve now. We'll give you a break. I won't do all 5 in one go. Okay. All of the origins of wanting to cling to somebody else for safety. Being absolutely certain that that was the only way, can release and be replaced by your own knowledge and your own safety of your own being now. All of the conditioning or programming that told you that you couldn't be safe in yourself and has been keeping you from your full resources as a human being can release, dissipate, dissolve, and drop away, fall away now. Okay, we'll have a little break, so relax your hands. We'll go back into it, just relax your arms because it can be a bit tiring. And breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Long out breath. Relaxing all your muscles and releasing any old energies that you don't need any longer. Okay, and then we'll go back into the pose. Okay. All of the origins of aspects of yourself that have been stubborn, got in the way, that you've got grumpy with because they haven't moved or shifted. You can find your compassion, your kindness, your generosity, and ease to understand and just for this moment allow that aspect of you to have its tantrum. It's scared. Without pushing, without forcing, only reassuring that aspect of you that thinks the only solution to fear is to block, to try and stop things, to try and block things for safety, to try and keep things the same. Introduce the creativity, the knowledge, the wisdom that you have as a fully grown human being, that there are so many other ways while keeping those aspects of you safe. You know you won't let yourself go into danger. So that aspect of you can feel reassured and trust you now. Notice that you can relax and release stubbornness and replace that with centered, grounded clarity. It does not mean giving up your power. You can reclaim your power by releasing the stubbornness of having to stand against opposition in the world. Deep breath. Do one more. All of the temptations to get angry, aggressive, attack first. While you attend to that, notice the part of you behind it that's scared, that wants grounding, stability, and draw on that from your very being that's 100% reliable at all times. Find your stability in your beingness and your ground. Okay, relax your hand for a minute. Have a little stretch, shake it out. Have a little wiggle, move it around. Here you go. All of that process for a second. Here we go. Okay, and we'll do the last one. A little bit of that one to go, and then the last one. So hand at the back of the head, thumb and ring finger on either side of the nose, middle finger in the middle of the forehead. All of the times you get offended, aggressive, because something isn't how it should be, see if you can see that behind that there's often this hurt when things aren't going your way. And just breathe and see if you can release that now. Soothing. And we can hold and support our own emotions. We don't need to lash out or attack the world, and actually we're then even more capable of moving forward in the ways that you want. And then the fifth one, any times you're tempted to pretend like I'll just not be here, when you go rigid, or you inhibit your behavior to keep you safe. All of the origins of any younger times when that was your strategy can be replaced by your adult wisdom of knowing that you know how to hold and handle social situations. You've got decades of practice. And as you release that inhibition, you can start to feel light and free. Gandhi talked about unified thought, speech, and action. And your behaviors can be loosened and free. Your actions can be loosened and free. You're free to move and free to act. When you're ready, just relax your hands gently. Have a nice deep breath. You might want to stand up and just shake it out a little bit. Okay. Okay, now here's an important part of this that I think often gets missed. I want you to just close your eyes for a second and tune in to the new state that you're in and the shifting and moving of energies. And let that wisdom, that change, inform more and more of the rest of you that needs to know about this shift and change having happened. Often we go through a change and then, because we haven't changed the start of it, we end up repeating old programs. Give yourself permission to release some old programs and conditioning now. And don't be too surprised if problems drop away, challenges drop away. Part of this work is to make these changes as a practice and then find out what happens in the 24, 48, 72 hours following. And so let these changes ripple forwards and backwards in time, as they will. And then gently letting everyone you know, at an unconscious level, at an energetic level, that you've made some changes. And you might see them at their soul level or energy level. It's an imagination. You can do it as a psychological level because we have maps of others. And if we believe they don't believe we can change, then we're keeping ourselves stuck. Whereas if we see them seeing us differently, then we can change more easily. So let this change ripple through to all of the network of all of the connections, because ultimately consciousness is one interconnected field of fluid interaction and creativity, patterns colliding and creating and disappearing. A sea of play. Leela, as the Hindus called it. And then with that in mind, just gently open your eyes, wiggle your fingers and toes. And now from here, think about where you're at with the outcome that you're looking for. So you don't want to jump to it. You want to look at it through this lens. You almost want to bring it up and see how it transforms from this new physiology and this new energy. And then tune in and see how much is that, how much more ease and flow do you feel towards getting that outcome, embodying it, being it. And then just put in the chat, whatever number you put in before, put the previous number and then what it's gone to now. Three to one, 2 to 1. This is 3 now, 1, 2 to 1. 5 to 2, 6 to an 8. So we'll talk about that when things go up a little bit. 8 to 5, 7 to 5. All right. Now, just tune in again and tune into your how you're being now, how it feels. We want to measure on a few different other axes other than just am I getting my outcome or not? Get a sense of where you are with your centeredness now. And if emotions come up, let them flow. Because most of the world is trying to look for positive feelings versus negative feelings. But it's kind of interesting that actually the suffering is really caused by stucknesses. And if you move into flow, even if you're sad, if you're not fighting it, it can be like a poignant sadness, a poetic sadness. Sometimes it's appropriate to be sad if we're grieving. If we're not fighting our emotions or resisting them, they tend to flow through. Yeah. So if you do get emotional, feet on the floor, just ground. And I think we did this last time. If you just do this a few times, there you go. Right. And now, so that was centering. Now tune in. How do you feel about grounding? How grounded you feel? And then tune in and what's happened at the level of safety. You can measure in other axes. How much do you feel you are just yourself? Not being pulled or pushed around anymore. Just looking for small changes, because small changes over a few days can lead to dramatic results. And then how do you feel about your sense of presence? Okay. And then let's just do it popcorn style. So by the way, one of the reasons I do it kind of from the front and put it in the chat is so that the recording can be used, for people's anonymity. But because this is an open program, if you just know that if you don't share anything that you don't want people to know will be shared, right? There's private programs with smaller groups and things. This is going to be like it's free as well. It's going to be a big open program. So So just know that. But it'd be nice to hear a few voices and just, what did you notice? We're looking for these more subtle changes of ways of being, because these are the shifts that most of us, it's the water we're swimming in, right? And when these kinds of things shift, all of the other problems or problem creations that were found built on these things start to shift and change. And this is not kind of theory. I've been coaching. I train in a program. Quite a lot of people know this, but I train in a program where I coach coaches. And so they're building their online businesses and they come up with internal challenges and concerns and fears and worries and the rest of it. And we get predictable changes over time. And there's a few here actually. And it's not just the outcomes that's important, because once the practice and the tools are in your hand, right? One of the goals, of certainly my goals in my other programs, is for you to be free of me, that you don't need me anymore. You've got enough of the foundations, you've got enough of the background, and you've got the practices, and they're in your own hands. That's where I come from, because there's more than enough people that need this stuff. So there'll be others. Gloria. I need to ask you to unmute again. One sec. I'll just say a format thing. So I plan to go for about another half an hour with another process. I'm not sure which one we'll do. And they'll be there on the recording. So if you want to go through them again, they're there. And then we'll have a short break, and then I'll be back for half an hour and I'll do laser coaching and questions and answers. So if you've got anything that you want some direct help with, happy to do that. Gloria.
So what was your question again?
What did you notice on a more subtle level in terms of groundedness, presence, safety, solidity, being more yourself on that level?
So for a while now, I've been like really not feeling centered, feeling very unstable with the economy. I've been watching my stock like drop, just being really uncomfortable financially. I have 2 kids I'm going to be putting in college. So just all this stress, like what am I going to do? So that's why I have this fear of like having that lack of money that's just going in my head. But after doing this and grounding, I felt calm and I felt centered again in me. And like when you were saying, just remember when you're an adult, you can do this. And I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. I could do that. Or I could do that. But I've been just so in my head and so fearful, because if you watch any of the news, it's just really intense, right? And I just felt like after it, like calm, centered, and capable. And it was really nice. So thank you. I really needed that.
Very welcome.
So,
and it brings up an important point, which is I don't really think of this as healing or coaching or therapy or any of those things. I think of it as training, like as education, as skill, right? That when we first learn to drive, it's clumsy, it's awkward, it's weird, it's strange. But if you think about driving and your attitude to it, it's a skill. I can learn to drive. I go and have some lessons, and then I know how to do it, and I get better at it, right? And then I have unconscious competence. So I think that's a healthier way to think of it. And the other healthy way to think of it is play, like exploration and interest and play. So thank you. Who else? No? How was that for people to do that process? Silence. Joe, and then Leonti. I'll have to get how to say your name properly. Joe. Is that them? Oh, that's me. I'll figure out how to. There we go.
Hello.
Hello.
I feel like I have melted into I'm both grounded and melted at the same time. It feels very delicious.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, initially what can happen is you go, well, what's that going to do? Right? My problems are still there, right? But here's the odd thing, right? There's the first step is that when we shift into these kinds of states, new thoughts become possible, literally out of a new physiology and a new consciousness, new thoughts. Also, just feeling more stable and grounded allows us to handle our life and our world much better. There's another odd component, which is then other people start responding to us differently. We start taking actions we wouldn't have otherwise taken, because the world is filled with opportunity, right? Because we've created a stable self that isn't at the whims of the uncertainty of the world and the ambiguities of the world. We're building a different relationship to the form of existence. So if you want to take it to Buddhism, this world is impermanent, as Ken Wilber puts it. Forms turn up, they torture you a bit, and then they leave, right? So attaching to anything impermanent, right, causes problems. Now, most people think that if you let go of your attachment to something, that you will lose that thing, right? But it's a misunderstanding that we were never taught growing up. That actually, the paradox is when you actually have the ability to let go of something, you're not gripping onto it, right? It creates more freedom in you. And there are many things that actually paradoxically come to us when we let go, right? You can think about the law of attraction type idea, where in order to resonate at the same frequency or the same pattern as something in the world that you want, if you're clinging, right, then you can't ever get there, right? You're literally keeping yourself away from it by clinging. You're keeping yourself in a different state than the resonant state with the outcome that you're looking for. Becoming one with, because eventually there's the realization there's no outside, right? There's no out there. But we'll get there if we do more stuff. The bridge from changing your state to doing new behaviors, new actions, and new responses, you can do it like this. If you're saying a question in your mind like, yeah, but how is this practically going to work, right? How is this going to work for me? Then you think about the actions you would need to take to get to the kinds of outcomes that you want, including, I don't know what that is, because that has a physiological component, and you use these processes on that, right? And what tends to happen fairly quickly is that because we are one energetic system with existence, that we're in a new game, and therefore some problems fall away, new choices become possible, weird things happen, like people show up with money and relationships, but we'll take that one for checking. But it's happened enough times now that it's kind of predictable. How do I say your name? Leon? I should be able to unmute somewhere. I know what I'll do. Hang on. I can unmute everyone. I just had it muted at the beginning, I think. Allow participants to unmute themselves. There we go. Yes. How do I say your name?
Leontine.
Leontine. Lovely to meet you.
Yes. So thank you very much. I guess I should put my hand down. Maybe you have to do it. You know, I experienced trauma many, many years ago that I feel like I am still working through. And throughout the whole, these many years, I'm a creative. I'm an actor. I have found myself stuck. And in the chat earlier, I was saying what I'm going after is that I'm still trying to reclaim my voice. And in what we just did, I felt empowered, but at the same time, quite emotional. Mm-hmm. And also, I got nauseous, which was, and you mentioned that earlier about you can feel a physical reaction. I actually did. And I think this is all great. I just feel like it's more of me going, like trying to figure out and center and saying, yes, I am Leontine, I belong here. I need to reclaim parts of myself that someone tried to stifle. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I know it's gonna, this is recording, that's all I'm saying. But I just wanted to mention that it's interesting to me that I feel an empowerment, but I also feel quite emotional.
Yeah. So for the emotions, the first thing is feet on the ground and breathe. And you can do the havening process, right? Just to soothe that. Because here's the weird thing about human beings is that we can want to overcome something that's happened to us, right? And it can be weird that sometimes that part of us doesn't believe we'll ever get there, but it's quite happy endlessly trying to get there. And when a shift actually happens, it's almost like I'm now in what would happen. I'm in a world I wouldn't know, right? And so sometimes the grief is letting go of all of the years of all of the struggle, right? And so what I would suggest is drink lots of water after this, move your body, right? Because these kinds of processes, it's almost like you can't even, if anyone's ever tried to lose weight, right? You know what they tell you, which is don't weigh yourself every day, right? Because weight goes up and down, it fluctuates, right? And you want to look at a slightly longer arc, right? So with these kinds of methods and processes, it's worth, even if it's just like a month, like, or 3 weeks, let's say, all right, it's like doing them over a period of time and letting go of the idea of the outcome. Just don't worry about the outcome too much. Just, hold the pose, do that process. Don't even think about what it's doing, and find out in a couple of weeks, right? Because what you know is physiological shifts were happening, right? Right. So the problem with the Western world is we try and use our head for everything, right? And it's very useful, but for these kinds of changes, going straight to the body is very effective. Cool. Thank you. Lovely to meet you. Nancy.
Hi, Non. Thank you for
Hi.
my coaching last week, because it did show up in my life and my relationship with my husband, and it's been, so thank you for that. And I just had a really
By the way, you guys will know what you mean when you see the recording.
Yeah. I had a very interesting experience today where I was in a group interview process for a company to run their sales department for a coaching company. And as I was in the middle of the interview, I'm like, I don't want to do this. And I said, you know what? I don't want to do this. And I said, but what I do want to do is this other thing. And it was a whole business plan that I laid out in like 2 minutes, that something I'd been thinking about, but I don't have the resources to do. And it was just like, that's it. Like, so if you're interested, call me. But it was just such a freeing moment to finally realize, like, I've been trying to stick myself in this, like, I'm just a coach, or I'm a this, or I'm a that, but really I'm a strategist, and I see things other people don't see.
Nice.
And I released having to want it look away. And it's like, even if I don't fulfill this idea, it is an idea that will help sexually abused women and give them a way to, in third world countries, to provide for themselves. Even if I'm not the one who brings it to fruition, it was on my heart, and now it's out there and somebody else can run with it.
Beautiful.
And just like not being attached to stuff anymore. I've always held so tightly. So thank you. I appreciate you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And you're very welcome. So, Nancy has been in other programs, and it just demonstrates, if you do, and it's not me, if you use these processes and these kind of mindsets, it works. It just does. And you don't need to believe anyone. It's in your own experience and your own evidence, because I don't want followers. It's crazy world. I want people following me around. I want people to be free and happy and enjoy themselves, and what you just heard there, that's a clue. Those moments of spontaneous, it's like I just had the whole thing in one go. You hear this with creative people, right? I had the whole thing in one go, and I just laid it all out, and it was like it just came to me. These are the kinds of experiences that we're kind of moving towards, as you unblock and clear some of this stuff, this is what happens more and more. Right? Is anyone feeling a little bit like, not me, this is not, it's not working, why aren't I getting what I want? No? Okay, good. Oh, Daniel. I tell you what, we'll do Q&A. So I'll do this piece and then we'll have a little break, and then in Q&A we can have actual kind of little bit of coaching sessions or little laser coaching stuff. Yeah? That sound good? Okay. All right. So if I was to summarize, basically the love and money, this approach, right, because it's kind of is still evolving, is a sort of Taoist effortless effort, right, which is coming more and more into harmony with your own energy. So there is this idea that most people are not living from their own energy, and something in them intuits that and knows that. And so you're constantly, like you just heard, push-pulling, trying to fit in to somebody else's conditions, right? And initially, if there are so many of them, it can feel like, well, where am I? Where's the room for me? However, as that starts to clear up, right, and you start to live more and more from your own energy, what you tend to find is, this is really strange, that you have less and less control, but you also need less and less control, and more just seems to just work out, right? And I'm wondering if I should play you. Maybe I'll do it on Thursday. Yeah, I'll queue up. I worked with a client, and she had issues around eating, and also controlling her schedule. And she did, and I worked with her as a one-to-one client, the exact kinds of processes that we're doing here now. And all of the missing gaps of her development got filled in, right? And she was diligent about it. Her eating disorder, which is quite severe. I don't like that phrase, but anyway, it was bulimia and she spent a year looking online, and it made it worse and worse. And she thought, this is something I'm going to have to suffer with, for decades, because that's what they tell you. And she had to kind of control and have a schedule and know what was happening. And a complete system shift from doing some of this foundational work, not at the level of mind, not at the level of beliefs, but at these kind of foundations. Now, the challenge with conventional therapy or conventional trauma resolution is they tend to bring these things up, and there is a danger of re-traumatization, right? Now, because they kind of they start with the problem, right, rather than start with your normal state, right, and go, how can I go from here to more freedom? Does that make sense? Right, and then you're very unlikely, emotions might come up, but you're very unlikely to bring up serious trauma. If you do have serious trauma, public groups like this is probably not the place for it. And then the advice is to seek out a qualified individual to help you with that. These programs, this kind of work is for people who are pretty normally organized, have the regular set of problems and challenges and issues that we all have. That's what these public trainings are for. Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to give you another meditation that who here is okay with things that are a little bit more esoteric and a little bit wacky? Yes. Okay, right. So this is called the 7 planes meditation. Tell you what, why don't we take a 5-minute break now, then we'll do that and we'll go straight into Q&A. How about that? Yeah. So be back at 17 minutes past. Okay, welcome back. All right, so within if you think about the physiology of the freeze response or the flight fight response, right? So we're in a situation. This is very primary in our nervous systems, which is when we want to either fight or run away. Right, blood leaves our thinking brain, our neocortex comes into our body, so we can run away. Therefore, our decisions get poorer, our choices, our executive function is impaired, right? So the more we recenter and calm our bodies, the better choices we make in life, the more options we perceive, more opportunities we perceive, right? But there's an odd thing that happens with the freeze response, right? Now, the first thing you need to know is that just because our conscious minds represent back to us what we think, so most of us think we're thinking, that isn't necessarily the whole story of all of the different ways that we make meaning. So, you know, this phrase, you know, a part of me wants this, a part of me wants that, right? So aspects of us in any moment in time in history that have got set up with a certain purpose and a certain outcome are kind of running. They're like an app that's running in the background, taking up system resources, right? And then there might be another one running and then another one running, right? And what we want to do is we want to start to close down some of these windows that are running in the background that we don't need until we need them or if we need them, right? And the thing about the freeze response specifically is there's a narrative that goes with it, which is implicit, a story basically that goes with it, which is if I move, I'll get eaten, right? So how many people have been in a situation where they think, you know, whichever way I go, this is hopeless, right? And human beings are smart, right? We don't do stuff. We don't go, oh, that's really futile. Let me at it. I want to have a go, right? We tend to avoid things that we perceive to not be possible. And if that's happening at some level of consciousness, then we make up narratives like, oh, I'll just watch one more episode of Netflix and I'll do it afterwards, you know, that kind of thing, right? So I just want to, and then we're going to do a process to release some of this stuff, right? Just to let you know. All right, so we heard someone talk about releasing stuck points, right? So at some point you start to realize that events are just events. Things are happening, right? In the world, whatever the world actually is, right? So two people can be at a party. One goes, oh, mate, it was an amazing party. It was incredible. The other one says it was awful. I had a horrible time, right? So the event is just the event, but we label it, right? So that was a bad event or a good event, right? Now, already what that's done is it's created a secondary response to the event itself, right? And in terms of systems, dynamic systems, the minute we start adding like meanings on top of meanings on top of meanings, these things can start to get stable. It's almost like we want to strip away these things and go, the event was just the event. It happened, right? So the hardest ones to deal with for human beings, where there's injustice, betrayal, things that shouldn't have happened, right? Especially with parents, because children expect their parents to be ideals, and of course they're not, right? So when it comes to releasing your stuck places, right, there's meanings, there's decisions, there's conclusions that we add to the original event. And often that causes much more suffering, the meaning that we added, than the actual event itself. So someone might, you know, be 16 and break up with the love of their life, and they might make a meaning, I'll never find anyone ever again, or I'll never be happy again. You know, those kinds of meanings. The actual meaning that's made is actually way worse in terms of shaping behavior than the actual event itself. Other common ones, I can't do this, I'll never be able to do this, I don't deserve this, they won't like me if I do this. Yeah. Okay. The world, God, people doesn't like me, right? Now, none of these things are actually absolutely true in any sense, but if we get a physiological response to them, we act as if they are true, right? So you start to understand where relative truth comes from, why we believe things. Our human beings are set up basically to believe that intensity equals truth. right? So the more intense something is, the more likely we are to think that it's meaningful and important, because it's a very good strategy if you're running away from a tiger, right? So whenever this is running, it shows up as blocks and resistances, and we just don't engage with things that are futile, right? So today we're kind of going between, I'm trying to want to go over these 3 sessions, kind of major components of, if you deal with them and address them, the whole relationship to love and money and your life and flow and existence becomes so much easier, right? So I'm trying to get that into these 3 sessions enough that you can kind of see, okay, there's a range of areas, and I can figure out which one I could have the highest leverage for yourself in that area. Right, so here's a list of limiting beliefs. I'll put them up there. So they're on, it's not possible for me, it's too difficult. Years ago, I had a juicer, a masticating juicer. And every time I would juice some fruit, I'd put it on the side thinking, it takes like 3 or 4 minutes to clean. I'll do it later. Right. And then one day I measured it, and it took 23 seconds to clean it. And when I realized that what I was measuring was not how difficult it was, but how difficult it actually was, but how difficult I felt it would be. Right. And this is, if you look around your life and consider that you could be very wrong about how difficult things are, because a lot of it is what we're bringing rather than how difficult something actually is. So I can't have what I want. We talked about earlier. Never get what I want. I can't imagine getting what I want. So sometimes people can get very emotional when they've wanted something for many years, and when they're on the verge of getting it, they can get incredibly emotional, right? Very disrupted, because they're rearranging the meaning of 20 years of something having happened. I remember I was at a phobia cure. I used to assist on Richard Bandler, Paul McKenna's trainings. And there was a guy, we did a phobia weekend, and the guy came in and he had a fear of flying for, I think, 10 years or 10, 15 years. And the rest of his life was fine, but he was on a plane once and it shook and his nervous system just learned it. And so because it wasn't connected to the rest of his life, it was pretty much an isolated kind of meaning making. It was gone by the break in the first morning. And he was absolutely furious that he hadn't found this method and process 15 years ago. And sometimes people are so unwilling to feel that fury because they know they would be furious that they keep the problem. They make a choice, right? And of course, this is not operating consciously. But the more we use these tools to reduce the charge on the emotions coming up, havening, EFT, TAT, it's kind of a bypass for these kind of system stucknesses, basically. All right. So, and then we're going to kind of go a little bit into, this is Barbara Brennan's work on the structure of the energy system. All right. So the question then is, how do you release these things, right? How do you let go of stuck places? Right. Someone mentioned feeling stuck. And the game is this, is that every time something gets triggered, a state gets triggered, it contains within it the story that says you can't get rid of it, right? Or there's nothing you can do, right? Or you can't change this, or this is hopeless, or there's no point, all of those kinds of things. And what we tend to do if we don't fall completely into it is we fight with it. And we go to personal development trainings and try and change things and shift things and feel stuck for sometimes decades, right? Now, the trick is that in order to be able to release these things, you need to be able to access a state of physiology that is sufficiently different from the one that's coming up. So as it's coming up, if it takes over your body and your mind, you're lost, right? So there's a couple of ways to do that. There's many ways to do that, but a couple of ways that are classic from trauma resolution. One is called titration, which is you bring up a very tiny bit of it. Let's just do it, right? So if you close your eyes for a second, get centered, which was what we've been practicing today, right? And then think about something where you get a negative kind of body response, emotional feeling. And then rather than bringing it up completely, bring it out over there somewhere, maybe 5-10 feet in front of you. and then take a tiny piece of it so that the effect of it, you can either make it very small or you can take a tiny piece of it. So the effect of it, you can digest it within the current stable state that you're in right now. Right? Take a little nibble and process that. And the trick to this is to take the smallest amount. And then when you've digested or processed that bit, and it hasn't disrupted the current state you're in, which is stable, centered, grounded, take another little piece. And it's not linear, because what's happening is you're learning pattern. So even if you take a tiny bit at the beginning, you take a little bit more, right? You kind of quote unquote get the hang of processing it. As I said before, you're learning a skill, which is I can be with it. I know how to be with a difficult emotion without it taking me over, while you keep your sovereignty. And you have a relationship to the experience rather than becoming the experience. This is stage development. And take another little tiny piece. Some people might find that when you've taken 3 little nibbles, the whole lot just kind of drops away. Might not even have to do all of it. And then we'll move straight from there into what's called pendulating, which is feel that feeling a tiny bit. Right? And now I want you to open your eyes, completely come back to the present moment, feel that you're here physically, put your hands on your body, check you're here, look around in the present moment, right? Literally move to look to the left, look to the right. Take a breath, right? Okay, notice that changes your state a little bit, and then close your eyes again, and then pick up a tiny little piece. This is called pendulating. You go between the thing that when you think about arises, shows up, then you come completely back to the present moment. And you move between those two. This is the realization that this thing is not happening now. Right? It's literally a waking up process of going, oh my God, didn't realize I have complete control over how much I bring this up or don't bring this up. That's enough. And then open your eyes. Look at the 4 corners of the wall in front of you. Imagine the 4 corners behind you. Feel your feet on the floor. Move your muscles so you can feel that proprioception in this moment. And notice what's happening. Okay, so there's a couple of methods. I want to wrap in the next 5-10 minutes or so. So let's just do this process. This is a completely different way of doing the same thing, which is we're going to move into states of consciousness that make it so much easier to release, let go, unfurl these knots or these tangles, right? So when we were young, I mentioned this last time, we were in theta states and alpha states of consciousness, which is slow brainwave states, right? So as we move back into those states, we gain the capacity to reaccess and repattern and release some of those old structures. We don't need to consciously know what they are, right? There's a part of our system that knows how to do this, right? So I like to tell people that no model is reality. Are we all good? Just check in. All in one, please. Yes. Okay. All right. So many people have tried to map reality, and I believe you can't map reality because it's a map, right? So you're always left with a map, not reality itself. But the Theosophists in the last century reckoned that you've got the physical world, Then you've got the etheric, which is your kind of energy system, like in the Indian prana and chi in the Chinese systems. You've got your aura, your chakras, your meridians, and that kind of thing. You've got your emotional body. Then you've got your thoughts and what's called the causal plane, which is this kind of stillness, when we're just resting in kind of beingness. And that is the top of the independent, separate self, essentially, right? And we'll find out what happens. Treat this as an experiment. And then we move into what's called the Buddhic plane, which is we go beyond the separate self into this vast interconnectedness, this presence, this loving field. And then we won't go too much higher than that, but into the Atmic plane. No, we may just stay in the Buddhic. Now, here's what happens. That when you're in these kinds of states of consciousness, it becomes so much easier to release the old astral, emotional energies. Because imagine trying to move a rug while you're standing on it. It's really difficult, right? You have to kind of step off the rug in order to move it, right? So it's a bit like that. It's like we're stepping off these normal emotional states of consciousness into a different state. And from there, we'll be able to kind of clarify, release, clear some of these emotions. That's the theory. In all of these classes, it all has to be tested in your own experience. Right? That's why I have lots of different models, because some work for some people. If you go back and you see session 1, it's not esoteric like this at all. It's much more psychological. There are some esoteric components to it. Right? It's kind of useful to be able to come at things from different angles of all the ways human beings have kind of mapped existence, because then you find the ones that work for you. All right. So I will leave it on the screen in case you want to peek and open your eyes. But here's what we're going to do. So there's 7 planes, and each of those planes is split up into 7 subplanes, and they go from 7 at the bottom to 1 at the top. Right? So there is no need to understand what this is. Right? I'll give you some words. And what we're going to do is we're going to start in the ordinary emotions. Everyone is in their ordinary emotions right now. And I'm going to step you up through the emotional body. You'll notice a shift. Even now, if you think about your emotions, you feel different than if you think about your thoughts, right? Into the causal plane, I'll explain that for you. We'll move into this Buddhic plane of kind of group consciousness. And you will experience what you experience. You can't be wrong about your subjective experience. And from here, I'll give you some instructions to release from the emotional body. Now, it's not really coming from me. So anything in your own system that you want to do that is takes priority, basically. Okay, all good? Let me just check. All good? Yeah, it's kind of fun, a bit floaty often, but your experience is your experience. Okay. Okay. So to close your eyes and notice your ordinary, everyday emotions. And just for this moment, just be with them. Just be present with your ordinary, everyday emotions. If you don't like them, just for this moment, relax and see if you can be fascinated by the fact that you can even create emotions. On that level, you're more evolved. I like to say more evolved than a chair. A child, chair's probably jealous because a chair can't have emotion. Right? But that's a bit of a contradiction. Right? So just tune into your ordinary, everyday emotions and give them space and let them be here. And we'll call this the 4th subplane of the astral. And you might think in terms of frequency. You can think in terms of density, so things are getting higher frequency or rarer, less dense. So moving to the 3rd subplane of the astral. Emotions that are a little bit less dense, more fluid, more flowing. More pleasing. And the 2nd subplane of the astral. If you yawn, that's okay. And the 1st subplane of the astral, your freest, lightest, easiest emotions, where emotions move freely and easily, fluidly. And the seventh subplane of the mental, kind of densest thoughts. Notice them, don't get engaged with them, let them go. And the sixth subplane of the mental, moving into easier thoughts, lighter thoughts, freer thoughts. The fifth subplane of the mental, more creative thoughts. When you're firing on all cylinders, and your mental faculties are working great. And then the fourth subplane of the mental, moving up, even though the numbers go down, to the Nobel Prize winning thoughts, the most creative, genius thoughts you've ever had. Notice that has a feeling associated with it. And then moving up now, you might have already noticed that you're starting to become a lot more present or still. So the third subplane of the causal. And it's, if there's lots still going on, notice the background in which it's all happening. And the second subplane of the causal. Attend to your stillness, your beingness. Let your state shift and change and adjust to match these frequencies. First subplane of the causal, what might be called your soul. And just for this moment, letting go of holding on to the separate self. Some people feel they're coming out the top of their head, other people just expand into the seventh subplane of the Buddhic. It's purely subjective. Just notice what's happening. Spaciousness. Just notice whatever is happening is okay. And the sixth subplane of the Buddhic, attending to, some people might call it a spacious, loving presence. You might think of your core radiance, your heart open. And the fourth subplane of the Buddhic. Many people kind of move to a level of humanity and all of the love that easily holds all of the suffering. The love is even greater than that. Compassion, kindness, generosity. The third subplane of the Buddhic. We'll rest here. This is where we'll stand. Giving yourself permission, if you want to move into your more natural divine nature. And from here, it's a very gentle intention without any will or force or pushing to see any tangles or knots of emotions to unfurl, any loops to unwind, especially other people's energies to drop away, where you've been fighting with others' energy in your space. you can just send that energy back to them, and it goes. So you can breathe more and have more space for your own emotions, the full range, appropriate to the experiences you're having. Releasing old stucknesses, loosening up, softening up. Relaxing into allowing all your emotions. The day you realize that you make all of them, they're yours, then we stop fighting with them, getting annoyed with them. Feelings flowing feel great. And from here, we'll do a clearing. Just notice the emotions and the relationship you have to money. And as soon as I said that word, breathe, relax, release. Don't let it contract your body. So you can process those reactions and emotions. Let the charge on them flow through and release. And you can enter a new relationship with money. One with more flow, more ease. And for now, let go of the how. That will be important, but not for this process right now. See if you can relax with money. So all the associations and meanings. You can stay neutral and centered and grounded and balanced in the presence of money. And then releasing any old hurts in the area of love. Don't have to do it all right now, just whatever's ready to let go. The things that drop easily lead to a pattern of being able to drop other things more easily later on. And if you want to, a part of your mind can take over doing that for you tonight as you sleep and dream and over the next few nights. But for now, moving back down to the fourth subplane of the Buddhic. And just track it, just notice the change. The fifth subplane of the Buddhic. Learning how to navigate consciousness, subjective consciousness, whether it's real or not, in an absolute sense. Sixth subplane of the Buddhic. Seventh subplane of the Buddhic. Now relaxing back into the separate self. No resistance. This is when you become more and more at one and in harmony with yourself. Relaxing into acceptance of who you are at a soul level and the journey that you've chosen, even if you don't fully understand it yet. And the third subplane of the causal. And bringing all this kind of intuitive wisdom of these upper states into the fourth subplane of the mental, the fifth subplane of the mental. Feeling that returning now, sixth subplane of the mental. Learning what shifts and changes and the 7th subplane of the mental. And back into the emotional 1st subplane of the astral. 2nd subplane of the astral. And then coming back to your ordinary human emotions, but now your emotions. And then very gently open your eyes. Wiggle your fingers and toes. A yawn and a stretch. Smile on your face. Wherever smiles come from. Who knows? And these kinds of processes, because they operate essentially both energetically but also physiologically, they activate different brainwave states, right? So we're not really looking for linear changes. We're looking for ways, ontological way of being changes. What we hear in the programs is people go, I'm not the same person. I hear this quite often. I'm not the same person who joined the program. And Annie and I, we have to, in that program, we have to kind of go into it a little bit and go, well, what do you mean? And it's not that they've become someone else. It's like they've become more themselves, right? It's the you that was already there can now be and has permission to be in the world, right? So it was a false identification that's actually let go of. And if you're open to it, I'd invite you to have a part of your mind, your unconscious, consider that you might want to no longer need constructed aspects of self that were necessary at one time for the conditions that were true then. And with that in mind, thank you for hanging out a bit longer than I planned. I hope you enjoyed it. We will have a 2-minute break. I'll do some Q&A, maybe not as long today. But put in the chat how you feel right now. And I'll read some of them out, so they'll be on the recording. Aligned, yes, that's what we're looking for. Delicious. At peace. Amazing. Blissed out, yeah. If you are going to be driving after this, then stomp your feet, feet on the ground. You can carry on, turn down the processing for now, carry it on tonight. At peace. I love that feeling, very smiley. Good, right? The combination of these different pieces will all be there for you on these 3 recordings. And so with that in mind, let's have, if you want to, that's the end of the session. Thank you very much. If you want to, be back in 4 minutes and we'll do some Q&A and any short laser coaching that people want. I can show you how we put this into action directly in the moment. All right, bye for now.